Here's the 3 things you'll learn in today's episode. Number 1, the real difference between change and transformation. Why transformation is more than just incremental change. Number 2, lessons from a career in change management. Alicia's journey and practical insights for navigating resistance and driving change. And 3, how project and change managers can work better together. Key strategies for collaboration to ensure program success. Welcome to the Transformation Leaders Podcast, your go-to source for insights and strategies in organisational change and transformation. I'm Tony Lockwood, your host and founder of the Transformation Leaders Hub, a global community dedicated to advancing excellence in change leadership. With over 25 years of experience in driving successful transformations, I'm here to share actionable advice and engage in conversation with industry experts to help you navigate and lead impactful change within your organisation. Well, hello, Alicia. Welcome to this latest episode of the Transformation Leaders Podcast. Great to have you here. So Alicia James, the author of the book Mars and Venus, that I'd love to get more involved in as we go through this episode. But please do, just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, where you've come from, and ultimately how you first got into change and transformation.
Sure. So a little bit about me, Tony, is that I've been in Australia now. My son is 26, so a very long time. And prior to coming to Australia, I was in the recruitment business. And so I put bums on seats, as I always like to say.
Yes.
And you know what? I had no intention of coming to Australia, but most of the people I placed, they were all Australians and people from New Zealand, and they worked so hard. Their prime goal was to be able to travel, so their central location was the UK. But once you put them in a contract, they were there. So that, I didn't know I was ever going to come to Australia, but I did meet the man that I would marry, and that's why I'm here. Some time went by, and that marriage didn't last. I decided that I was going to stay, because for whatever reason, I was going to stay in Australia. But as time rolled on, and I was temping, etc. And I got into beauty therapy because my recruitment expertise didn't transfer to public service Canberra, and I was used to speaking directly to the HR people, and there's a whole new kettle of fish here. It was you speak to the procurement. Yes. The procurement officer, and so it didn't work because I was a little bit too pushy, apparently. I was told very nicely, a bit too pushy. And I suppose in the UK, that's just been normal, I'm giving you 3 best.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because, the standard view of Australians is that they're quite pushy. So
isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's quite.
Oh, well, no, it's,
must be just the ones that get up and come over to the UK.
Must be. So, kind of long story short, I decided I'm having a career change. So I was a beauty therapist for a while, and then someone introduced me to the concept of teaching comms, communications to beauty therapists. So I did my workplace training and assessment at Canberra Institute of Technology, and I was there for a while. Meanwhile, my son, who was about 5, met his little friend at school, and of course how the parents then become friends. And I met an English lady who just took me under her wing, and she was like our family over here. And she said, "We need to get you into the public service, Alicia. It's safe and secure." And I thought, you know what? I don't mind being safe and secure. I'd love to get into the public service. And so I entered the public service, went for a couple of interviews, and surprise, surprise, I landed this job as a trainer. It was on an online system I won't give you the name of the organisation, but kind of long story short, within a very short space of time, Tony, one of the big fours came in, evaluated the project I was on, and it was determined they had far too many trainers, and one of us could go off and be a change analyst.
Right.
And that was me, and it was one of the worst experiences of my life.
Wow.
Because,
Well, let's dig into that a little bit later.
yes, yes. So it was, yeah, that's what you'll be. And I obviously understood what the word change was and the word analyst was, but that's no idea. So that was my job. So 18 months of my life was terrible. I hated it. And within that time, I then went and did some, they didn't actually put me on any courses. I took myself off and did some change courses, etc. And roll on, 20 plus years. I'm there and in that space, and I'm morphing a bit now, still in the change space, but I'm glad that I went through that.
Yeah, well, let's cover that off in a little bit more detail as we progress through the episode, because it's all too often with in these discussions, people have fallen into change and transformation almost by accident. Very, very few go into it with the as a career path, but yes. Typically what we find is that when they go into something by accident, they love it, and then they're there for the next 20 odd years. You went in it by accident, hated it, but you're still there after 20 odd years. So there's a story in there, I'm sure. So let's talk about that. We always start these podcasts with the question, how do you define transformation? So given your last 20 odd years in change, what would your definition of transformation be?
That's an interesting question. Do you know, I was thinking about that, and not all change is a transformation.
No.
All transformation is a change.
Yes.
Would you agree with that? So I think the difference, I'm going to have to explain the both, because I was struggling with, how I viewed it. And I think change, just ordinary change, could be incremental steps that you make to a specific issue, or it could be some new tools that you're bringing on board, and that's a group in the organisation that's focused on a specific change, but it's not a complete organisational shift. Whereas for me, transformation in itself is a big shift. It is looking at, the way you actually think and operate, the way the company thinks and operates. And it could even, impact the business model. So the services that you want to deliver, you might have a whole new think about that, because it's a big transformation. Yeah. So to me, people use that word, using it quite often these days, transformational change. And I'm thinking, well, is it really? So how big is it? So it's to do with the shift, I think. It could be a shift in culture, but it's a big shift. That determines, and it goes organisational wide, as opposed to a few, specific structures that you want to rejig and change. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And I think we ask that question all the time, and I don't think I've had the standard answer, or not the standard. I don't think I've had the same answer twice.
No.
Through the 90 odd episodes that we've done now, because it is quite personal. It is. I'm asking for your definition. And everyone's view is different. But I'm a little bit, I'm certainly more like aligned to your view, that is organisational wide. Transformation is organisational wide. Change can be functional, or it can be team, or it can be it can be geography based. But transformation is more broader. But we only ask that question just to put into context everything else that we're talking about.
Yeah. You should put them in little cards, or the responses. Question.
The book, The Transformation Leader's Body of Knowledge, came off the back of a number of people on these calls sort of saying, "No, there's a book in this, so I might take you on that idea."
Yes. Yeah. Fascinating.
So, 20 odd years ago, you went in to become a change analyst. You hated it. Your words, not mine. We're there for 18 months, but you're still there now. So what flipped that view? Because a lot of people, if you spend 18 months not liking something, the first opportunity, you probably would naturally look to get out of it. So what was it that sort of kept you in and sort of kept that seed growing and created the person that you become?
Yeah, good question. I did a couple of courses, as I said, to understand what change was all about. And I realised that as a mother, as a human being, I'd always been changing, going through changes. So I thought, well, that's what it's about. So you've got to move people. So the word analyst, I felt through me. Mm-hmm. Analyst. I placed business analyst. I don't want to do one of those. And I was confusing those two parts. But I went on these courses, as I've said, a couple of them. One was implementing change in 3 days. It was I can't remember who did it now, the Australian Business School of something. But I loved it. It provided that overview of change and gave me a bit of a background to sort of understand what it is that I'd be going into. But I was always then looking to move. So I was permanently employed at the time, and I was looking to move. And I wanted more responsibility and change because I knew I wasn't an expert, but I wanted to get out from where, because everybody knew me as a trainer. Yeah. You know, I wanted to get out from where I was. And fortunately for me, I was living next door to someone who was working in a different department. And she said, I'll speak to XYZ. I'm sure we can get you into blah. And that's exactly what happened. There was a recruitment round. I went for the interview, got on really well with these two guys, actually. And I got offered the job. It still wasn't a smooth thing because I was still learning, really. And I got to understand that, you know, you're dealing with people who you want to change them, but they're not interested. And so it was really trying to really understand how was I going to shift people? What did I need to do to get to sort of understand where they were at? And it was a change impact assessments that opened it for me, because the change impact assessment looked at the current state, and I always like to look at the current state. And I'm a bit like that. So if I'm going to be doing something in a couple of years, I like to look at where am I now? What do I need to do to get there? So that sort of made sense to me. So a change impact assessment, if I wanted Tony Lockwood to shift from the platform that he'd been used to using into something else, I need to understand exactly what Tony Lockwood did in his everyday job and capture what that looked like, and then where he needed to go. And in the middle of that is the impact. So that helped me. And I always start off with change impact assessments. So when project managers say to me, all we want you to do is to write a training manual, I say, yeah, okay, but I still have to go back to that map.
Yeah. I think it's important, isn't it? I use the analogy a lot that all we are human sat-nav in so much that, you know, if you go into your car and you need to go somewhere, the car needs to know where you are at the moment. The sat-nav needs to know where you are at the moment to be able to
I love that
path to somewhere in the future. So whether it's a small-scale change or whether it's an organisational-wide transformation, we're here. We need to get to there. So let's be clear about that destination where we are now, and then we can start to lay down the path, the roadmap to get from one to the other.
I love that example, and particularly with what do you call it, GPS here? But where it says, "Do you want the fastest route, or the whatever route, or gives you the choices?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the analogy I think the analogy works because when you're in your car, it's constantly looking and considering what's going on around it. So if it's an accident, so we get a hurdle, it then works a way around it. And that's what you've got to do as a change person or transformation person.
That's it. Speed camera up ahead. Thank you. Yeah. So all of that, you're absolutely right. You're helicoptering over a program of work, or you're literally hovering over it, scanning what needs to be done. And it may not be you that needs to do it, but you've got to have an eye on it, have an understanding.
Absolutely.
I think as I got more and more educated about change, I became more in love with it. I don't think I was truly in love with it until I went into contract work, and then I could just move on to the next one, because that's what I'm a bit like that. I like to move.
Yeah.
You do the job, get it done, and move on to something else. Otherwise, you could become part of the problem and change management forever and ever.
No, absolutely. So a couple of weeks ago, when we had an initial discussion about this session, you told me about your book, Mars and Venus, and the background to it, and I think immediately we struck a chord, didn't we? Because there's so much similarities in the way that we're thinking about that. So just tell the listeners, the viewers, a little bit about the book and where that came from, and the inspiration of creating a book, Mars and Venus.
Thank you for this opportunity, because do you know what? That book had been in my head for probably 3 years, and it was inspired by frustration, really, because each time as a contractor, I arrived on a project, I was told what to do. Very rarely was I able to come in and, assess the change, connect to stakeholders, etc., without being told what I needed to do. And I actually thought that was just me. I kept thinking, it's a problem with me. Why is it that people feel they have to tell me what to do?
Who was telling you what to do?
And predominantly project managers,
right.
And project managers, predominantly project managers, and some business analysts who had been there in an organisation for some time, very well respected. I actually get on really well with BAs because I refer to them as foot soldiers on the ground. They're the ones that often have engaged with the stakeholders first. Mm-hmm. They've captured the current state. I really get on with a lot of them, but there are some who are a little bit like project managers, and predominantly project managers, from my experience, felt that they ran the show and, I was just one of their resources. Mm-hmm. So it was living in my head. I started writing the book and I couldn't really structure it properly. I was trying to write it chronologically, and I was talking to a friend of mine and she said, you need a coach. You need someone that could help you, And I thought, a brilliant idea. So I did. She put me on to a couple of people. I found one, and this particular person had written 4 books. And the help that she provided was about not repeating myself. So start blogging on LinkedIn, start becoming visible about your gripes, if you will, and all of those should form a chapter in your book, which is what I did do. So all of those 12 chapters, I've pretty much talked about it on LinkedIn. So that really helped me. She didn't help me write the book and she wouldn't even look at the book until after it was after it had been published, because she kept saying, I don't know nothing about change management. But funnily enough, now she's read it, she messaged me and said, you should get this book out there. It's amazing. And I like that feedback, because she really didn't really understand what it was all about, but the book sold that. So it was born out of frustration in that, often project managers, and it's not a criticism about them, it's just that they've got a job to do and they just see it as, getting the job done on time, the budget, scope, getting it over the line. And there is no discussion about how that's going to look or how we should do that with the change manager. Often the scope's already been defined. He's got his scope, and then there's a line that says change management somewhere on that scope. And it doesn't even start at the beginning of the project. It ends probably before UAT, and that's it. So in answer to your question, that's how it started, from frustration. And then once I started building it on LinkedIn, I got feedback from people that said, oh, yes, we think that too. And so it wasn't just me, but no one had actually put the book together, and I called it Mars and Venus. And I have to say that name didn't come out of my head. I was talking to my coach about it, and she was saying, oh, my God, this sounds so confusing. Remember that book called Mars and Venus? Yeah. How men or whatever it is. I can't remember the title now. I said, I know. She said, you should call it Mars and Venus. And I said, and the tagline should be how project managers and change managers can work together for the greater good. So that's what the book's called. And so it starts off with giving a bit of a background about, change management and project management, why there seems to be a disconnect. It talks about how they can work together, how we should do it. And I've got 5 steps to call it, and I've called it Get It Right the First Time, collaboration formula, to help these 2 individuals who are experts in their field come together and be one force.
It is important, and in my experience, and as we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, my experience is very similar in terms of that belief that the change manager is subservient to the project manager, and actually, if they don't work together properly and effectively, the project or the program or the transformation doesn't deliver what it's set out to deliver. It might be, if it's a technology program, it might have the icon on the screen, it might be delivered on time, and it might be delivered on budget, but it's highly unlikely to deliver the benefits that were set out in the business case if you can't get the first people to change what they were doing, or to click the icon on the screen if it's a technology project. And it's that bit that I think is often missed. And part of that, I think, is that you get to the end of the project and there's a whole raft of other things to do now, so I've got to just close this project down and move on. And that benefits realization piece tends to get diluted, and the project manager or the program manager has moved on to the next one, so it doesn't actually reflect on them whether or not the benefits have realized or not. And and I think that's where maybe the whole focus needs to change moving forward, because it's a waste of time spending £1 million to deliver 5 million, which is in the business case, if you're spending £1 million and it's only delivering 1.1 million, or sometimes 850,000. It's the benefits that really matter, in many respects, and absolutely, those benefits are diluted if it takes too long to get delivered, or if we spend too much to get it delivered, the benefits are diluted. But I think a lot of times the benefits are diluted because we haven't got the change, and we don't focus on the embedding of that new system or that new process.
Right. You're so right, because once you've dropped it, it's gone live, the change hasn't really happened yet.
Yeah.
So, there's a whole raft of things that you need to measure to make sure that people are going to adopt it. As soon as it's gone live, how many calls to the help desk? What are those calls? Is it structural, or is it to do with training? Or you've got to be on that, because people are not drinking this water, because they can't find that button on the left-hand corner, or whatever it is. It's never going to be used, and you're never going to realise those benefits. So, yeah, you're right. I don't know, do you have a view of how we would measure it, how we would sort of focus on that to start with? I have a bit of a view, but I'm just curious.
Well, I think it is. It's from day one of any project, any program. The key is to focus on the outcomes. So what outcomes are you looking to achieve? So those outcomes might be financial, they might be operational, but they have to be, what outcomes are we expecting from the people? And how do we want those people to change? How do we want the process to change? How do we want the customers or the clients to interface with us? How does that need to change? So get real clarity around those outcomes, and then drive towards delivering those outcomes, as opposed to just driving towards getting the icon on the screen. Or
exactly, it's the outcomes, and what and how do you actually get there? And you need, the change manager can do so much, but you do need people to take charge of their own benefits realization as well too, I think. Because often a change manager or a program manager who's moved on, there's no money. They haven't factored that buffer in. So because it's just putting it in, isn't it? You just drop it. We've gone live, yay. 4 weeks after that, the vendor's tripped off, you've gone through your warranty, everything's fine, but it hasn't. So it's...
Yeah. You mentioned something critical there, though, that as a program manager, as a change manager, as a vendor, when you're working in change in transformational project programs, the key is to transition that activity into BAU and do it in the right way. Part of that is, as you say, to get the stakeholders, the key stakeholders, to accept that they're now accountable for the delivery of this, whatever it is. And it's not the project manager or the change manager or the vendor that's got accountability. It's the sponsor. So and that's often missed. I find that it's like they're pointing to, or they're looking to the vendor or the project manager to deliver it, as opposed to saying, what do I need to do to help you ensure that these outcomes are achieved? It's a mindset.
He's done his job. The project, or he or she have done their job. They have delivered the project. That's his job, within scope and within budget. But often, sometimes project sponsors don't really understand what this part of their role is. They're, especially in the public service, they're just given that job. That's not their everyday job. And it's quite difficult for them, so they don't have the proper coaching and understand, what this whole gamut of work means, and, how you need to be able to transition this change.
So when you go into a new project, when you get brought into a new project or a new program, what's the first couple of things that you look to do?
First couple of things I look to do, I always like to look at the business case, understand why the change. If it's not the business case, depending on if I'm the second or first or third change manager that's gone in, I want to have a look at the current state of everything, and I want to have a chat with the PM. I usually you sit down with that person. They've been there from, usually you don't find project managers swapping in and out of a project. They've got the project and then there, and that person will sit down and say, it is a bleep bleep, or we've got to do X, Y, Z. They'll give you the layout of the land. And so I'm looking at what is, first of all, is I'm looking at that business case or whatever the project management plan, whatever it is, all those artifacts. I like to get a background, as much background information about what the change is first, and then I like to sit down with the project manager and get his spin on it or her spin on it, and then quite quickly go and meet and greet the key stakeholders. Just say, I'm here, this is me. Let me know what what are your key bugbears, but what's a good time. If I'm not speaking directly to them, I'm speaking to their EAs or someone that I can get in with their calendars, so that you can, create some sort of an impact within, the first month that you're there. But I like to understand what the change is all about and get the history.
So how do you position your role with those stakeholders then?
How do I position my role?
Yes.
When you say that, do you mean how I see the role of a change manager?
Well, no. When you're engaging with those stakeholders, I'm just thinking practically.
Yes.
So you've got the meetings with the stakeholders, the key stakeholders. So how do you position that discussion with them? Because I think it's a critical discussion. So I'm just trying to get underneath the cover a little bit.
That's right. So I pretty much have understood what the change is about before I set up these meetings. Yeah. And it pretty much is to get to understand, for me, what their concerns are. What are their bugbears? What is it that's keeping them awake at night for their particular part of the change? Yeah. So that's what I'm, as a fact-finding thing. I don't go in to say I'm going to do this and do that, because I have no idea if I can do this or that. I really want to find out what it is that's keeping him or her up at night. Yeah. And they have a lot to say, generally, these people, when you first meet them. And I think it's important for them to give them the opportunity to have a voice and to speak about it. And then you've got to juggle that with the project world. Mm-hmm. That will say, don't worry about that. It is what it is, Alicia. We've got X, Y, and Z to do, and that's the education piece. That we've got to bring people along this journey, and get them to collaborate with the change. And to do that, I need to be able to listen to what they have to say and to see how I can best service that.
I think it's so important to go and engage, but also to listen, and to pick up their pain points, as you say, the things that are keeping them awake at night. Because I think if you can demonstrate to them in that discussion that, one, you understand that, and two, that you will be able to, or maybe not able to, resolve some of those things, but getting that clarity right up front is critical. And part of that engagement piece, I think, in terms of just building that relationship, and you by building that relationship, you can start to, what's the word? That engagement piece becomes a lot easier. It's not you, it's not them and us. It's we're together on this, and we're moving things forward. So I'll help you, but I need you to help me. That type
building
of
that respect. Absolutely, you're right, Tony. It's building that respect, isn't it? And demonstrating that you understand by listening. And you may not be able to solve all the problems, but you genuinely have to spend 90% of the time listening, and then coming away. And I think once people see that, I know I'm like that. If you've listened to me, my dad was like that. He would listen, and you'd always think, oh, I'm going to get what I want, because you'd be intently listening to what you have to say. And then he would say, well, no, you're not going to do that. But I felt respected because, whereas, Mum had a different view, and she'll let you know that off the what's the word, before you got much of your request out. Yes. But Dad was a little bit more of a person that tended to listen, and I like that. I think that's a great quality, because you don't have to agree. You may not be able to deliver.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
At least you can escalate if you need to.
I think the key, though, is to really listen, isn't it? It's not to be seen to be listening. It's to really listen, and then to engage. And all too often, a lot of people will listen, but they're thinking about the next question they're going to ask.
Exactly. I think it makes life harder.
Yeah.
Just listen to understand, and then reflect on what you might need to do. Because, often it's way above your pay scale, some of the problems that you're presented with, and you have to find a way to make that visible to others if it's going to be a roadblock. I'm always looking for what could be a roadblock for me down the track, because they have some very powerful stakeholders, as we all know, and they can stop a change. They may not want to get on that bus, but you want to know pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And because until you know, then you can't do anything about it. So it's keeping your head down and trying to avoid these difficult conversations is a recipe for disaster, because they're always going to come. So let's understand them as early as possible, and then we can start to mitigate that risk, or we can start to mitigate or put in place some actions that might actually prevent it from happening. But often what I found is that by allowing the stakeholder to open up and get this blur out of their head, often by just going through that process and talking it through, they start to mitigate it in their own mind anyway. So they're coming along on that, starting to come along on that journey. And if you can get that momentum and keep that momentum going, you can take what you originally thought to be a really challenging stakeholder, they can become a big advocate for you.
Absolutely. Is it on the hierarchy of needs, Maslow hierarchy? What is it? Being listened to? What is it? Is there one of them? There's five, isn't it?
Yeah, I think five. Yeah, 4 or 5. Yeah, but yeah, as you say, being listened to or being valued is critical.
Exactly, being valued, and you're right, because often you can find a stakeholder like that who becomes your strongest advocate. And isn't that a blessing? Isn't that a blessing? Because they can go out and literally say, oh, it's not going to be as bad as that, because they're not going to listen to the change manager. They're going to listen to their leaders. They're going to listen to their direct managers. And you want to get those direct managers on side. You want them to understand what the change is about, understand what the risks and issues are, so they can speak confidently to their team. So, yeah.
Super. Well, if we were going to leave people with one main message then around, as you say, how to get project managers and change managers to work better together, what would that key message be?
I think the key message is for these two individuals to actually get together for a half-day workshop. I put, I won't say my life on it, but my hand on my heart, if you can, and it's on the backbone of some of the things that you just said, Tony, if people feel listened to or really appreciate that as a change manager, I'm there to help. I'm not there to make his or her life difficult. Mm-hmm. We have the same objective, which is for this project to be successful. And I'm hoping that I've worked a lot on my ego, because we all have a bit of an ego.
Yeah, sure.
So and to leave that at the door and say, look, what's the go? Tell me everything. Yeah. This is, what do you see my role here? It's, so to get it right the first time, a whole 5-step formula. I'm going longer than one word or one sentence here, but there is a particular approach to sort of get to that point where you trust each other, where you can collaborate together, where when they see both of you come in, well, so they don't care which one comes because they see you as one.
Yeah.
And it's music to my ears.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's key, isn't it? And one of the things I've tried to do, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully, to be fair, but when you are with the co-sponsor of the program, your number one objective is to make that person look really, really good. And if you can go in with that mindset that actually this is not about me delivering, it's about me helping you to deliver this change, these outcomes. Yeah.
That's your job.
That's the job. And it's no more complex than that.
No more complex than that.
But we've all experienced people that are, well, actually, yeah, I'm the important one here. I'm going to be seen to be the person with all the answers, and all you do there, I think, is just end up with lots of people pointing guns at you, metaphorically.
Exactly.
They want to shoot you down as quickly as they possibly can.
And that's fear, isn't it? It's a bit of fear there as to why they live that way. But yes.
Well, thank you very much, Alicia. That's really interesting. I think we've covered a few things there that we've not covered in previous ones. So that's really good. Good luck with the book. What we'll do on the show notes, we'll put a link in to let me have a link, and I'll put it into the show notes, and people can access the book and buy the book from you. But yeah, good luck. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. Great.
Brilliant. A quick note about the transformation leader's body of knowledge. I love this quote from one satisfied customer. It's like having a highly experienced mentor by your side 24/7, providing expert guidance on all things transformation. Click on the link below to get your copy and to accelerate your journey to becoming a transformational leader. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to subscribe and join the conversation. Your voice matters, and by subscribing, you'll not only stay up to date on our latest content, but also contribute to the ongoing debate around what it takes to lead successful transformations. Don't forget to grab your copy of the Transformation Leader's Body of Knowledge. It's a must-have resource for anyone serious about mastering change leadership. The link is in the description below. And while you're at it, check out the Transformation Leaders Hub, the #1 global community for those working in change and transformation. See the link below. Thanks again for listening or watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.